Good morning, business owners. It's Mike Bosma, your business savvy CPA, coming to you from Studio B. That's the Studio Bosma Business Center, our newest experiment, doing the radio show via video, but it's not on TV, so it can't be a TV show. Anyway, we'll figure that out in some other installment of Bosma on Business. But for those that have listened and now watched through hopefully our YouTube channel, and so you get a little bit more intimate knowledge of my face for radio. So speaking of face for radio, on today's installment of Bosma on Business, Mark Hermsmeyer is going to talk to us about his journey into entrepreneurship, how he's helped scads of businesses sell for bazillions, and the common mistakes people make and some of the things that we can do to help navigate around that. So, Mark, welcome to Bosma on Business.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
Maybe
I've been a friend of the radio show for a number of years now, so it's nice to finally make it on, and hopefully there's some nuggets of wisdom that come out of this. So we'll see.
That's what we hope every Saturday, Mark. Just some nugget, just something.
Yeah,
the love of everything holy and good. So give us a little bit of your background. Who are you? Why should we care?
Yeah. So, Mark Hermsmeyer. Let's see. Started my career working for startups in San Francisco. Did that out of college. I eventually made my way to Southern California. Actually was in defense for a number of years before going back to grad school. Came out of grad school and got picked up by a venture capital firm in LA, Zone VC. Zone is was part of the larger Draper network of portfolio funds. I think the last I checked, the total assets under management for Draper was about $2.5 billion. So did that. I was with Zone for a number of years, mostly doing sourcing potential investments, leading business analysis, doing financial modeling, really just vetting deals and presenting those deals to the investment committees. So I did that, and that sort of kicked off what I would say was like the second phase of my career, which led me down finance and operations, and had a couple of successful exits on my own. So leaving Zone. So we basically, the Zone funds, I think in total was close to $150 million. It was heavy tech, a lot of social media type stuff. We had a handful of successful exits. We sold one company to Google. I think upwards of 50 to 75 investments and 5 to 12 exits. So pretty decent. That fund was coming to end of life. So most of those funds, at least in those days, were, 10-year funds. We made it through the bank meltdown of 2008. And coming out of that, the investment ecosystem was just on its face a bit. So I pivoted from VC and I went into running companies. So basically operations, finance, I've managed sales teams. Coming out of venture, my focus was really operating. Heavy finance background, heavy accounting background, and then getting in and working with, I would say, founder-led and PE, private equity-led backed businesses. Fast forward to 2017, 2018, I had an opportunity to help co-found a consumer products company. So essentially my foray into products, right? I was in tech, SaaS, defense, I would say, defense, obviously some products in there for the government and so on and so forth. We launched a consumer outdoor brand in started it in 2018. We launched it in 2019. We ended up growing that into a global consumer products brand, 50 plus countries, and then exited that. We sold that to a large publicly traded company in 2023. Most recently, was recruited for a CFO role for a mid-market, another global consumer products brand, similar space. And then I left that and now I'm working, what I'm passionate about is helping small business owners, really try and achieve their liquidity goals through structured suites of products around exit planning. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, yeah. And that's, it's interesting, Mark, as I've known you now for a couple of years, you have a unique paradigm for, helping people exit their business. So we're currently joint venturing Keystone Exit Partners, really, again, created a rubric to give people an exit readiness score. But I think what's interesting about your background is you've been there and done that. You've worked for the Drapers of the world. Right? You've seen this at a very large, in a very large scale that most people never get a hint of. And there's a lot of things that I guess, when people start their own business, it's really my working definition of entrepreneurship is I get to pick my path. I get to do it my way. Now I get all the fruits of my labor. If I'm wildly successful, yay me. Or if I fail miserably, boo-hoo me. But being able to see this at a high level, you start to see some common threads about things that are going to go well versus not. And I think those are, parts of what I want to talk to you about today is what are some things that when people do well, that seems to have them trend towards some kind of successful exit or just a successful business, whether or not you're looking to sell. And ultimately, I'm a fan of having everybody, pretend, you'd rather always have your business ready to sell. So if something happens where you're like, yeah, I really need to exit this thing, or you have a bad day at the office, you don't have 2 or 3 years to work ahead of you to get everything fixed. So just run it like it's ready to, like it could be sold if you want it to. Well, what are some of those things that you see that, small business owners are pretty much not clued in on?
Well, I think it's a great question, Mike. I think having come at it from the venture side of it, most of these, when you're coached by venture investors as a founder, from day one, you're setting out to build a sustainable venture with enterprise value, wrapped in it. And so, I've always looked at businesses as, you have to check certain boxes, right? And I think we'll get to those boxes here in a minute. The conversely, on the other end of that spectrum are business owners that sort of are scrappy. They go out, they solve a problem in the market, whether that's providing a service, providing a product, but they're sort of starting with the model inverted, and then they have to play catch up, right? So it's like when you're building a company that's private equity backed or venture capital backed, you're designing the systems, the structure, the team, the product market fit. You're designing that up front. And so you're solving for a lot of those problems. And I would say a lot of what makes these businesses transferable and sellable, you're starting from kind of point one. And that's a lot easier to do than have to go back and sort of course correct.
Well, yeah, because, like as is explained to me, Ben Luton, who does our IT, some of the things we're doing now at Keystone, he said it's like we're, building a plane while we're flying the plane.
Right. Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, you're going to crash and burn. So like there's real consequences. And that's where if you're, venture backed or VC backed or investment bank, whatever, private equity, you're setting up the systems and processes. That's all part of your business model. That's all part of your cash flow. So you put your business plan together. You're like, hey, we need to invest in these systems and processes, put all that together. And then when at the same time in tandem, you're developing your product or service, and then you're launching, and that's just what it costs to put it together. Sophisticated investors know it's better to put all those systems and processes together in anticipation of success rather than if I'm successful, then I'll do it.
Correct.
Then I'll put it together.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You use the plane analogy. I always use you're trying to tie your shoes while you're running a race, right. And you just know how difficult that can be. And so I think some of the things. So you asked the question, okay, so what are some of the things that you need to look out for, right? I think early on when you're looking at value creation is defined as many things. But a lot of small business owners, I would say, many small business owners look at revenue and just are highly fixated on, top line sales. There's much more to it than just that, right? You need predictable cash flow, so recurring revenue streams, systems that scale, teams that scale. So there's a lot more behind the scenes that I think that unfortunately, a lot of these small business owners they're not thinking of that. They're going and solving the problem in the market. And, and I've talked to we talk to these guys every day, guys and gals, that they are so in it. They are so entrenched in the day to day and trying to just keep that revenue trend going that everything below the scene, beneath the surface gets overlooked. And so I'll say things like, your financial clarity or the business's financial clarity. Many bookkeepers are not good at preparing professionally managed financial statements that are going to translate into sellability of that business at some point down the line. So, is your income statement, your P&L, your balance sheet, those are must-haves, and they must look like, a professionally, sort of built set of financial statements. The second is, we talked about this, the owner, the CEO being so entrenched in the day-to-day that they are highly owner-operator And that does not translate to transferability if and when that owner decides he or she wants to sell. So the two that we see most are, hey, you got to get the books cleaned up. You got to start de-risking the business. De-risking the business in terms of getting the owner out of the day-to-day ultimately translates into higher multiples when that business, when he or she wants to sell that business. So it's much, yeah.
Right. But let's talk about that for a second though, Mark, because there is a whole bunch of people listening to this show, watching this show. And what they heard, what you said was, we're going to de-risk the business away from the founder owner and make it scalable. And what the owners just heard was, you mean I got to hire a bunch of overhead, and then I'm not going to, I can do the work. And probably the best example is I have a buddy helped sell his business a couple of years ago, medical device company, great business, but he did everything, right? I mean, he did accounting, he did purchasing, he did everything, trying to, de-risk it away from him, and he was just like, well, why would I pay somebody, with $100 an hour, $70 an hour to do bookkeeping? Well, I could do that. It takes a second. They're going to take longer. I can just get it done. So when we come back, I got Mark Hermsmeyer, Keystone Exit Partners. We're going to talk about de-risking and scaling your business and why it makes sense, even though it may cost a buck or two. When we come back, it's Bosma on Business.
In life, things aren't scripted.
If you're an athlete, we need people like you and translate those skills to officiating.
You can get a lot out of it.
It happens in every town, in every game.
We never have a perfect game, but the rewards always outweigh the negativities.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma, talking to Mark Hermsmeyer, Keystone Exit Partners, about some of the key tips or tricks to make your business less owner-centric. That is counterintuitive for a lot of people that are watching and listening to the show, because they're like, that just equates to overhead, right? And probably, Mark, you led with, we got to get your books cleaned up. So this is what everybody does. I'm telling you, it's like over hundreds, thousands of companies now. They're, and I fell prey to the same thing, right? So running the Bosma Business Center, right? So of course, because I need one of myself or Jill to be a real estate professional, we Rochambeau, and it became Jill, my beautiful bride. So she became the real estate professional. So part of that was to run the building so that we can deduct real estate losses. So that's how that works. I can deduct real estate losses if you have a real estate professional in your family, husband or wife, where more than 50% of your time is spent in a real estate trade or business, minimum 750 hours. So, and then you can invest in real estate, you can deduct it, do these cost segregation studies. It's awesome from both an return on investment perspective, and awesome from a building wealth and tax efficiency, I should say. But the trap is, Mark, I, like everybody else, like every other entrepreneur, said, well, Jill, why should I pay somebody to do the books? I know you have an HR background, but I can show you how to do the books. And so she's doing the books, right? And I'm looking at the financials, and I'm like, well, honey, you've confused balance sheet and income statement. You're not capitalizing the right costs, so my net operating income isn't what it should be. Now the bank's all frustrated, and because that's not her skills and training. But every business owner makes the same mistake, Mark. Right? They have the spouse do it, the wife, right? The husband, whoever is a non-entrepreneur person. Well, you just do it on the side. I don't want to pay any money for it. Why is that a terrible idea?
Well, I think there is this notion of, to scale and to get the owner out of the business, that they got to go out and hire, a GM. Most of these businesses, it's just not, it's untenable to go try and hire a professional manager. So, we look at it, and we started Keystone Exit Partners to, in partnership with CPA firms like Keystone CPA, really to help provide a structured suite of products and solutions that get these businesses sellable and sort of more ready. What I kept running into as a CFO was, I kept seeing the same issue over and over again. Owners are cleaning up their books. They're wrenching on the systems in the 11th hour, and it's too late to really materially affect the valuation of that business and the risk component, right? So there's two things that drive a sale. One is What are your financials? Are you running a good business financially? What is your operating leverage? Are the margins good? Are you maximizing economies of scale in terms of your operating expenditures? So there's that part, right?
Yeah.
That gets you to the bottom line, your SDE or your adjusted EBITDA. The other part of it is the multiple, and inherently laden in with the multiple is risk. We kept running into businesses, and I would get asked, hey, can you help find a buyer for this business? We did it on our own when we sold our consumer outdoor products company, and a lot of the stuff, and it made the deal so much easier. Everything was buttoned up. We had our contracts, we had financial statements that looked professionally prepared. But I've been in situations where I'm asked, hey, what do you think we can get for this? Can you find a buyer in the next 90 days? And you start really going beneath the surface, going, guys, it's almost too late, right? Like, you need some time. And I know, Mike, you and I have talked about how much time do you need? Well, you need 6 to 12 to 18 months if you haven't done a lot of the things we're talking about up front. That doesn't mean that it's not going to fetch a higher multiple, but you really have to go through and look at this in terms of, the lenses that a buyer would look at it through.
Well,
and so,
it's interesting, Mark, because we're talking to business owners, right? And I think there's also part of it with his pride or the ego that comes in. How much did I sell my business for? And why do you care about a multiple? So, I'll just give you an example. I had the client, actually referred in. They needed to get their business sold. Husband diagnosed with Parkinson's, and had young kids. And he's like, I want to be able to see my kids grow up. I'm not going to be able to do that, with the rigors of the work. So because it accelerates or exacerbates my Parkinson's symptoms. So I need to sell the business. We go in and we start, unwinding the business, taking the personal expenses out, all the rest of it. And like you said, if somebody's looking to buy a business, it's all about risk. But in his case, he had a certain number in mind. And I'm like, you don't have that business as it's currently baked, and we don't have the time to make it into that business. So this is what it will fetch. And he spent a year trying to prove me wrong, and he couldn't, because the market dictates what a company is worth. You have out there literally hundreds and hundreds of people that looked at that business, that signed a non-disclosure agreement, looked at the books, came back with, this is what we think this business is worth. And it was not what he wanted. And at the end of the day, when I had this discussion with him, I said, you need to do a financial plan so you know how much you need, because you don't know how much you need. You just have this pride-baked, ego-baked thing. I need to sell it for this. Well, you don't. If you have enough other wealth, right? Or if you need to get the multiple to have enough to live the lifestyle you've grown accustomed, fine, then put the business together that's going to support it. But what everybody wants is to have the valuation without having the business that supports it. And those two just don't coexist.
right.
Well, at least not for any kind of sophisticated buyer, right? That's where, when we got into the business brokerage world, our licenses hung at NAI Alliance. They're asking, isn't business brokerage fraught with litigation? I'm like, we've done over 60 transactions in 4 years. Haven't even had a sniff of it. What's the problem? Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But a lot of business brokers, the way they operate their business is they try and basically trick people into buying a business. So all they have is seller's remorse, buyer's remorse. Like, what did I do? I wouldn't do this again, because they haven't unearthed all these problems. They go into it blindly and they find out the hard way.
Yeah. And I think that, so if you're looking at like what we're trying to solve, right? We've seen, we've done many transactions. Mike, we partnered on some, I view myself, and we view sort of our offering as upstream from traditional M&A, right? So that's business brokerage, that's M&A advisors. Like what we talked about, most businesses, unfortunately, there's something like 70% of wealth is going to transfer hands in the next 5 years. 80% of those businesses are unsellable. So brokers are sort of put in this position of list it for whatever you can list it for. These listings sit stale, and it's a bad look on the business. It's a bad look on the broker. So, our thesis is, hey, we can come in there beforehand, and there are, and what we say are small changes, big impact. Quick wins. Like, what are the quick wins? We touched on some of them, but when we view businesses, we view them through 6 lenses. Like, are you generally exit ready? Now, you touched on it as well, the valuation gap, right? There inherently needs to be some financial planning and tax planning up front. So are you starting to get that house in order? Secondly, we touched on financial clarity. That's a big one. And we can do a lot, right? We can do a lot with messy financials. Owner independence is the third lens that we look through. And that's a tough one because that takes time and that's not something that can change overnight.
You can't just hire it out. Well, hold on a second. So we're running up against the hard break.
Okay. Sure.
So Mark Hermsmeyer, Keystone Exit Partners, talking about kind of those toggles for what you need to think about to have I wouldn't even say a business to sell. It's really a healthy business.
Right.
When we come back, it's Bosma in business.
What if you had some money waiting for you at the IRS? Money you could use to fix up the house, tune up the car, get a little something for the family, or save for a rainy day. If you worked and didn't make much money last year, find out about the Earned Income Tax Credit at irs.gov. It makes life a little easier.
Welcome back to Bosma in Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. At the bottom of the hour, I always give you a little tax nugget. The tax nugget I will give you today is, as we are in October, October is the month that if you have an S corporation, that you need to tell your S corporation, if they provide you an automobile, what your personal versus business mileage is. Now, that sounds a little geeky, I understand, but we're defending now in excess of 100 IRS audits for other CPA firms. And a common ding on these audits is, where's your mileage log? Well, guess what? If you have an accountable plan, that is, if your business, your own S corporation business, you use the car, all you got to do at a minimum of once a year, ideally monthly, but nobody does it monthly, at least annually, you substantiate to the business what your personal versus business miles are. Then you don't have to worry about the log. You just have an accountable plan. You include that in your W-2, done, and done. Audit bulletproof. That's how that works. That's what you're trying to do. Just eliminate risk. Speaking of eliminating risk, Mark Hermsmeyer from Keystone Exit Partners, I cut you off halfway through your list of those toggles if you're exit ready.
Yeah. So we touched on them. There are systems out there and they sort of all look at things in a similar but different fashion. So, just to recap, how exit ready. And again, back to Mike's point here, building a good business from day one and planning for the future and planning for an exit. That's, you can't understate that enough, right? I think I had said, coming from, my world of building businesses from the ground up, these are things that we're doing inherently every day, right? Mm-hmm. Strong systems, predictable cash flow, product market fit, all the things. But in terms of exit preparedness and planning, we really look at it through sort of six pillars, as we call them. One is exit readiness. And again, back to Mike's point, tax planning, personal financial planning, all of that comes in that exit readiness pillar. The second is financial clarity. The third is how owner dependent is the business. This is a tougher one, but we can work around that. The fourth.
Well, actually, let's just pause there right there, sure. Mark. So, like in your quiz that you took, or that you can take, go to KeystoneExitPartners.com. Take the quiz. You'll see how exit ready your business is. But this one hit me right in the face. It said, "Can you take a 2-week vacation and your business not collapse on top of itself?" Now, you said it way better than that, but it was like, or actually, I think it was a 4-week vacation. I can do a 2-week.
4 week. Yeah, 4 weeks.
4 weeks. That's a little bit harder, right? So, and you're like, oh, well, if you're the number one revenue generator, right? If you're it, and that's all good, right? I mean, those are great businesses. And as Mark said, they may or may not be sellable. But if you want to grow a business where you can actually do things other than grind every day, then you need to build a business at scale. So, and I'll say this, right? So I had, all this IRS work. I have another tax resolution firm who shall remain anonymous, although I'd like to throw them under the bus because they're hacks. Anyway, one of my audit clients, this tax resolution firm helped his brother. So, hey, I just want this guy to oversee this, and just kind of make sure that, everything's on the up and up. And how many audits have you defended in the last 6 months? Oh, none? Well, I've got 100. But anyway, client's always right. But the reason I say it is this, from a scaling perspective, so we sent, he's now questioning a bill that we sent the client. And we sent him the time, like, this is the amount of time is what we did, right? Like attorneys, right? Here's all the detail. He goes, well, I've never seen anything like this. We don't track our time. We just bill a flat fee for what we do. And I said, well, you can do your business model however you want, you get to. But in order to scale a business, that means in professional services, that means there has to be more than one owner. And how do you divide the profits between the owners if you don't track your time? If you think forward to what you want to become, and that's where people get stuck in that trap. And we're looking at acquiring a bunch of these businesses. We're in current negotiations with a handful of them. And we're like, let me see your time. And how are you spending your time? And like, well, we don't track it. Well, how am I supposed to value if I'm going to make money moving forward if you don't have any earthly idea what you spend your time on? And how to allocate comp between people, who's performing, who's not, right? It's like doing manufacturing without cost accounting. Mm-hmm. So anyway, just to get it, talking about getting it away from the business owner, it's actually not as hard as you think, but it definitely takes some structured finagling.
Yeah, and I think Mike, good points. What we see as a starting point, and this might be it's one of the easier to affect. It's one of the harder for business owners to let go of, is decoupling sales from the owner. If you and that may seem like a lofty aspiration. You get, and I've been there. You get really wrapped up with your clients or your customers. You want to be the face of the company, but to the extent that you could start decoupling sales from the owner, that's a logical step. First step in the process. I would say, aside from going out and hiring a GM, can you hire a good sales manager, or can you hire someone that could come in, and that might even be, a handful of customer service representatives that are taking some of the burden off of the owner in terms of, affecting deal flow. That's right. The starting point. And then from there, and it's back to your point, what are you spending your time on? We look at things, everything we look at is a quick win. Delegation checklist, who's working on what, really looking at the team. Can the team absorb more, and starting to pull the owner out of the day-to-day? But a lot of times that starts with sales.
Right. Driving revenue.
Yeah.
I get it. What's the rest of your 6 pillars, Mark? Sorry.
Yeah. So number 4 is concentration risk. This is a common one. We look at every business through the lens of how much risk there is in terms of concentration around customer base, right? Does any one customer represent more than 30% of your, I would say on a high side, 30% of your revenue? Product and service mix is another one, and supplier risk. If you're a product company, does all your product come from one supplier? Obviously, there's risk inherent in that. Mm-hmm. So the risk component of things gets wrapped up in the multiple, because it's not really easy to decouple that from your financial statements. So to the extent that you could solve for concentration risk, great. That's going to drive a higher multiple. Number 5 is team and leadership. Do you have a good team and leadership structure in place that will allow you to scale? And then finally, your brand and your market position. So every deal we look at, every business owner we support, it's those 6 pillars.
Yeah, and I think those are things where each one are important, and some are fixable, some are not, candidly, right? I mean, if you have, I was talking to one business owner, Mark. He makes parts for a couple different auto manufacturers, stamped steel. He has 2 customers. There's no,
yeah.
He got 2 customers. So it's a concentrated industry.
Yeah,
he does millions and millions of sales with great margin, but he's never going to be not concentrated.
No, you're going to take that on the chin for sure on the multiple, 100%. Okay. Yeah.
Fine, right? So what you do there is you find a strategic buyer that has the same problem, and they're not afraid of it, right? Like I had a listing, or I have a listing for it's called a pocket listing, so it's not in the public domain anywhere. Great company though. They make accessories for tactical firearms, right? So like police shotguns type stuff. These really cool accessories. All right. And 100% of his sales are to law enforcement. So, but there are certain people, they don't like the industry if it has to do with guns, right? If people will just stay away from it. I don't want to be involved. So who's a good strategic buyer? Somebody's already in the industry. They've already got their mind around being in the space. So that doesn't matter to them, right? So, it's just, and that's where I think as business brokers, we have to find the right people, right? And they're out there. I mean, I've talked to now thousands of them, of different strategic buyers, where like, if you can partner with somebody where those objections to a maybe plain Jane buyer, plain vanilla buyer. Well, I don't like that because it's in that industry, or it's concentrated, or it's owner dependent. You don't have to worry about an owner dependency if the person that's going to replace you is going to replace you. They're looking to run the business, no problemo. Right. But if you're selling to somebody like a private equity firm or somebody like that, they need on-site management to run the business. So you understand that's where I think the value of Keystone Exit Partners, Keystone CPAs, business brokers, is we help identify who's the probable purchaser of your business eventually. And then we can build the business and lean into that. So that way, if there are certain things that aren't fixable, no big deal, right? We know how to sell those businesses. So Mark Hermsmeyer, when we come back, you're going to tell us the number one thing that somebody needs to change tomorrow to maximize their enterprise value. When we come back, it's Bosma on Business.
I was born with a congenital heart defect and almost died. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. Learn more at helpheart.org.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. Always good times on the breaks. Out of studio, Mark Hermsmeyer from Keystone Exit Partners. So, Mark, if a lot of people listening, they're busy, they've got more than they can do. So, if you can give somebody a quick tip, trick, or hack on something to really move their agenda forward quickly, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. I would say, with, again, two camps, right? You're building and you're planning for the future. That I may respond with a different answer. If we're looking at business owners that are considering selling in the next, 1 to 3 to 5 years, just do not wait. Don't wait for the 11th hour to begin, sort of planning. I would say, to the extent that you can start taking action today, and those can be very small wins. They could be, low effort, big impact type stuff. We talked about the pillars. I would say just start slowly. And, and every day or every week, just quick wins, small actions. Like I said, small changes, big impact that, we can help you in terms of what would they move the needle most. But I would say just take some action and start checking off these quick wins.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was asking you the question, I was asking myself the question. I thought, if you can move the needle forward the most quickly, the first thing I would do is fire yourself. Just like, okay, if you didn't work here, is there somebody else who can take this on? Because I think basically most business owners are, they're the catch-all, right? If somebody else isn't loading the dishwasher at night, they'll load the dish. So they're always the first line of defense instead of the last. And I think a lot of times if you're trying to decentralize your business away from the founder or owner, you got to say, if there's somebody else to do this, I have to get it off my plate. Now, there's going to leave a vacuum there. There's going to leave a void of time, and we can talk about that. But the first thing you could do is fire yourself. Like, okay, if I didn't work here, who else could do this, right? And when I did that, when I took the quiz, right, and I'm like, could I take a 4-week vacation without it negatively impacting my business? And I answered no, right? And 1 out of 5. I'm like, oh, because why? So now every action I do, I ask, is there somebody else in the organization that should be doing this, that's empowered and that I trust to be able to take this on? And so now I'm just a little delegating machine, all right? Because it really is a mindset, right? Same thing is like, I took that little quiz, and it's, how much of my personal, discretionary business expenses are in the business. And that concept is called quality of earnings. How much is a business owner going to make if they buy this business? And if it has all your, your discretionary owner expenses in there, like your car expense and your country club and all the stuff. So I'm like, took all that stuff out, right? I can deduct that through my management company. So now I know what this business is making without adjustment. That's de-risked things. And that really, whether or not you're thinking of selling your business, as my advice to the business owners is, you want to do these things to have a solid business because they're good business practices. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to sell. I'm not going to ever sell whatever. But it's like, no, you do these things to have a solid business that you can scale, right? That's not so dependent on you. I mean, you have people that work for you, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner. Heaven forbid, you get COVID. So whatever the next malady is going to be, right? and then you're out of pocket. You know, I was there was a business owner I was reading in Entrepreneur magazine where, you know, he was flying his plane and crashed it. He was laid up for a year, right? And so you just like, okay, now what happened to that business? If it's so dependent, the business is baked. So anyway, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your journey.
You bet, Mike.
I do want to schedule another one and talk about all the other stuff you did before Keystone Exit Partners, because it's
happy to. It's been great. I really appreciate it. And, you know, hopefully for the audience, you know, there was, like we promised, one nugget of wisdom that came out of this. And if not, then hold me accountable and I'll be back on for at least 2. So
there you go. There you go.
Right.
So if you missed some of this, you can always go to our YouTube channel. That's Bosma on Business. But what I'd really encourage people is make sure that you're on our newsletter. Mark's a regular contributor to that newsletter. All, you know, really the nuggets that are actionable that week to think about, just to kind of create that consciousness of thought. Go to keystone.cpa to sign up for that rather. And then next week, guess what? More of the same. So next week, we're going to have Nika Sal, founder of NBN Signings Notary Services. She's really a testament to grit and resilience in building her notary service. I think you will want to make sure you put a bookmark on tomorrow or next week at 10 to be able to get her journey. Of course, if you need anything, just go to keystone.cpa and ask for a meeting. Until next week, business owners, keep that business engine humming. It's Mike Bosma, your host of Bosma on Business.